Hello. No, I'm just gonna go in.
Hi, Emily. Welcome to your first HCOG meeting.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Well, I need one more person before we have a quorum.
Okay.
Oh, I have Susan Seaman trying to find the link. So let me resend that to her and then we should be good to go.
Okay.
Debbie, maybe for good measure, also send it to the others that aren't here yet. Maybe others are having similar challenges.
Very nice.
So I just resent it. So we should be having her log in any second.
Great.
And I just got an email from Supervisor Mitron that he's not going to be able to make it after all.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone to the November Humboldt County Association of Governments Board meeting. This meeting is held pursuant to Assembly Bill 361 and the HCOG Board Resolution 21-24 and will be held virtually until further notice. And our first item of business is a roll call.
Supervisor Bass? Mayor Jones?
Here.
Mayor Seaman?
Here.
Mayor Heinley, Councilmember Goldstein,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember West,
Here.
PAC member Arroyo, and PAC member Jackman.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a matter of housekeeping, we are going to move by chair motion. We're going to move item 2 to the consent calendar. And at this time, we will adjourn as the HCOG board and reconvene as the PAC. And with that, our first item of business is a presentation from Caltrans District 1 on the active transportation plan with Caltrans representative Alexis Kelson.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen. So I am Alexis Kelso. I'm a transportation planner for Caltrans District 1, and I'm here today to give a short overview of the District 1 Active Transportation Plan, which was finalized at the end of October. So what is the Active Transportation Plan? It's part of a statewide effort to implement one of the actions in Toward an Active California, which is the State Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. The District 1 plan identifies pedestrian and bicycle needs on every state highway in Del Norte, Humboldt, Lake, and Mendocino counties. It also prioritizes highway segments and crossings based on the 4 goals in Toward an Active California, which are safety, mobility, preservation, and social equity. One thing I want to emphasize is that this plan does not identify projects or provide recommendations to address the needs. It is just focused on capturing the needs and prioritizing highway segments. So it is basically a needs assessment. How was the plan developed? There was a project team comprised of district staff, a consultant team, and a technical advisory group that included multiple people from each county, including the regional transportation planning agencies, pedestrian and bicycle advocates, transit providers, and local agencies. The TAG helped make sure that data in the plan were accurate, that needs in their communities were identified, and that our outreach included underserved communities. And they were instrumental in defining the prioritization criteria and weights. The consultant role is to conduct the data-driven needs analysis. They use data such as speed limits, average daily traffic, and existing pedestrian or bicycle facilities to identify needs such as infrastructure gaps, high-stress crossings, and places where freeways are barriers to connectivity. In addition to the data-driven needs, we invited the public and our transportation planning partners to identify needs. This was mostly done by completing an online map-based survey. We had over 450 people complete that survey, identifying more than 1,400 needs across the district. This survey is still open at survey.catplan.org. So if you have comments to identify needs, you can still take that survey. You can also leave comments on the UC Berkeley Street Story tool, which I know has been used extensively in Humboldt County. Both of these map-based platforms have been incorporated into the plan and will be reviewed during project initiation. So how will the plan be used? At the statewide level, data from the plan informs setting complete streets targets in the State Highway System Management Plan, which then informs SHOP investments. Within the district, we review all of the identified needs, regardless of priority, when we're initiating SHOP projects. We'll then incorporate addressing those needs into projects as SHOP capacity allows. We'll also use the needs and priorities to identify and prioritize standalone projects for any available funding sources such as SHOP or the SB1 competitive programs. And then there are some areas where many needs are identified on high priority segments, but that may not yet have enough planning completed to initiate a project. So these are areas that are good candidates for future planning studies. In Humboldt County, I know that some of those locations are already undergoing planning studies, like part of Route 200 between McKinleyville and Arcata, and then 101 south of Eureka. And the plan could also be used by local agencies. It can be used as a data source when planning projects on or near the state highway system. We have data about the existing facilities, as well as all those public comments on needs. Also, as you're planning or developing your local active transportation network, please reference the plan to see if any locations where that network crosses the state highway system are identified as needs. And if they aren't, you can let us know and we will incorporate them into the plan so it can be updated on an ongoing basis. And then sometimes there's a need identified on the highway, but the highway might not be the best place to address that need. So as we move towards implementing the plan, we'd like to coordinate with local and regional agencies on where the local parallel routes might meet those needs better than on the highway. So the immediate next steps we're taking is that we've already begun using the plan to include improvements in the SHOP 10-year project book and during project initiation for the 2024 SHOP. We also want to continue evaluating needs by incorporating data from planning studies and by keeping the public survey open. And then lastly, we're going to transition the technical advisory group into a pedestrian and bicycle advisory committee. And we hope that many of the people who participated in the development of the plan will continue their involvement through that committee. So here is a link to where you can find the plan. And thank you very much for hearing my presentation this afternoon.
Well, thank you. And does anybody have any questions for her before she slips away? Well, I got the info off of the slide, but could you send that to the HCOG office and they can be resent out? Because I can think of a couple of areas that in our jurisdiction that might have some impacts that can be put on the list. And I'm sure that other participants here on the board and the TAC may know also.
Sure. I'll also put those links in the chat here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the presentation also. Yes, some nice scenery in there. I hope you got to slip out and take the pictures for the slides.
On a few of them I did. Yeah, we live in a beautiful area.
Yeah, yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move to item 5, a public hearing to receive comments on unmet transit needs. And I believe Stevie is handling this item.
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson, and good afternoon. My name is Stevie Luther. I'm the Associate Regional Planner. I just want to give a little background on this item. As the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, HCOG is responsible for allocating local transportation funds according to rules in the Transportation Development Act. These funds are used for public transit operations and transit coordination. LTF funds can also be used for local street improvements and bike and pedestrian projects, but only if there are no unmet transit needs that are deemed reasonable to meet. In coordination with the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, the SSTAC, HCOG leads this annual process to gather comments on any public transportation needs that aren't currently met by the existing system. Although comments often touch on operational issues like needing more bus shelters or better info on route changes, those issues do not qualify as unmet transit needs in this process. The comments are sent to the operators, however, and their responses are included in the final report. After the comment period closes for this UTN on December 31st, 2021, the SSTAC will review those comments and in the spring of 2022, make a recommendation to the board to adopt a finding regarding the unmet transit needs and whether any are reasonable to meet. So finding a need reasonable to meet isn't tied to the available funding for that particular need, but rather the requirement that the new services would be viable and meet a minimum of a 10% farebox revenue recovery over a 2-year period. Past UTN findings led to the Humboldt Transit Authority starting service to the Tishnan Village in Lolita and on-demand service down Old Arcata Road. Both of these services underperformed and were ultimately discontinued. With COVID-19 impacting ridership numbers over the last several UTN cycles, the unmet transit needs like late night service, express commuter service between McKinleyville and Eureka, and increased service frequency have been determined not reasonable to meet based on the projected ridership and farebox returns. It should also be noted that an unmet transit need finding isn't necessary to dedicate increased funding for new transit services. Jurisdictions submit claims for LTF monies and could choose to save up for starting new transit services. However, the same issues of financial viability just described would still be a factor in the long-term sustainability of new routes. So I'll conclude my presentation and turn it back to the chair for the public hearing. Thank you.
And thank you. And with that, we can open up the public hearing. And do we have any people online for comments?
I do not see anybody online, and I have not received any public comments for this.
Have any of our board members received any comments they want to turn in here? I'm sure that, like us, you've probably held a public hearing in your own council meeting and addressed that, but sometimes we receive them a little bit later. Well, finding none at this point, I guess we can close the public comment and move on to the consent calendar. So with that, as we move the AB 361 to the public comment and we have the minutes of our last meeting, has everybody had a chance to read those? And if so, we'll entertain a motion.
Mayor Jones will move to approve the minutes of October 21st, 2021.
I'll second that.
And also the AB 361 findings.
Yes, included in that is the AB 161 findings.
Okay, we have motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Goldstein,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Rex Jackman,
Yes.
and Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to our action items.
Chair Johnson, I believe we skipped, sorry to interrupt, but we skipped item 6, which is the public comment on non-agenda items.
Yes, sorry about that.
I don't know if we have any, but.
Do we have anybody?
Sorry,
Go
I have
ahead.
not received any public comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we will move to the PAC action items amendments. First one being amendment to the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan and adoption of the 2022 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And we have a staff report.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so this item is for both things you just mentioned, but primarily what we're focused on is the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And HCOG is required to prepare the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and this goes into the state Transportation Improvement Program, and we're required to do it every odd year. And we have to submit this document to Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission by December of every odd number year. So the California Transportation Commission essentially provides a fund estimate over a 5-year period and sends that out to the regions. This year, we also have funds coming through the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act that we will distribute through this same type of STIP process. And so in total, there's approximately $5.8 million available for our region, and this includes about $378,000 that comes really to HCOG for our budget for programming, planning, and monitoring. And then previously, the board voted to allocate up to $300,000 for a mitigation project that was associated with the Highway 101 Eureka-Arcata Safety Corridor. This was the Spartina removal mitigation project on Tuluwat Island. And so that has already been accounted for. So what that left us with was just over $5 million available to our region to program new projects into the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And so staff worked with the TAC to do a call for projects. And what you see in your staff packet, the draft RTIP that's in there, is a result of unanimous TAC recommendation. Those projects, they worked really beautifully together to decide the funding levels. We really had an oversubscribed program, and they did a really great job of kind of narrowing it down and figuring out which projects could move forward, what funding levels, and which to move forward first, which ones would qualify for the coronavirus money, which will be available a little bit sooner than the rest of the STIP money. So they worked on all of that, and the recommendations are included in that document in your packet. But just to summarize here, the city of Fortuna would be funded for the very early stages of planning for the 12th Street 101 interchange modernization project, city of Trinidad, Trinity Street rehabilitation project, and then city of Rio Dell, there's a neighborhood connectivity project. County of Humboldt has Myrtle Avenue rehabilitation and bicycle improvements. City of Arcata has improvements to Sunset, LK Wood, and Sunset Avenue 101 North. City of Blue Lake has a truck route improvements through Greenwood Avenue, and this is a complete streets project. So these were all the projects, some of them funded for construction, some of them funded for planning and different stages, but this is all what the TAC worked on and recommended and what we put in the document. So one thing, especially with the Rio Dell project, so all projects that are funded in the RTIP, they must be included in the regional transportation plan. So the project, the neighborhood connectivity project that Rio Dell put forward is very compatible, complete streets project, has safe routes to school components, really in line with everything in our regional transportation plan, but it wasn't on that project list. And so along with the motion to adopt the RTIP, we'd be looking for the amendment to the 2017 regional transportation plan, which is still, our effective RTP. And so we'll look for that amendment so that we can add that project to the project list, making it eligible for this funding. So those are the two resolutions you have. First, for the amendment to the RTP to add that Rio Dell project, and second, the resolution that would adopt the Regional Transportation Improvement Program and direct staff to forward it to Caltrans and the CTC. So that's what I've got for you. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Executive Director Burks?
Mayor Jones here. This is not a question. It's just a comment that as mayor of the town and a long-living resident of Blue Lake, our truck route has been a concern of our citizens for many, many years. And it's really exciting for us to get this project on board here, because our truck route goes right by our elementary school in Blue Lake. And so that's been such a concern as far as safety goes. The sidewalks are not wide enough. The children are often walking in the streets because they'll walk 3 or 4 abreast and there isn't enough room. There's just so many safety issues there. So to see this included is just really heartwarming, and I look forward to breaking ground on some of this project in Blue Lake.
Well, thank you. Any other comments or questions? And is there any public comment on this item?
I have not received any public comment.
Okay. Well, I know that the following Mayor Jones, I would just say that our project listed there with the 12th Street interchange improvements, I was going over that in my head today because I live not far from there. And in a matter of probably 600 feet, we have what I call points of conflict. There's 5 points of conflict, no pedestrian facilities. And in those 5 points of conflict, there are 12 different movements that cars can make that impact pedestrian flow through there. And then once you get to the overpass, there are no pedestrian facilities, and you end up with mobility scooters, bicycles, and wheelchairs in the traveled way transiting to the opposite side of that overpass to get to the west side of Fortuna, to the commercial district down there. So this is something that we've been looking forward to for a long time. With those comments made, is there any other board members that have or PAC members that have a comment or a question? And if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I was going to let Mayor Jones do it because she was excited about it. But I move that the PAC recommend the HCOG board approve Resolution 2127, amending the 2017 Regional Transportation Plan to include the Rio Dell Neighborhood Connectivity Project, and approve Resolution 2128, adopting the 2022 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and direct staff to submit the RTIP to Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission. As a mouthful.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Chair Johnson, before the vote, I did just see that it looks like maybe we did have a public hand up for this item that we weren't able to call on.
Oh.
Okay.
So I want to make sure if we have the opportunity to still capture that we.
Yes, I didn't see a hand.
We didn't either, but I just got a notice. So
Oh, good.
we can, sorry to interfere with the flow, but.
No, that's okay.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks. So this is Colin Fisk with the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities, or CRTP. Thanks for catching my hand there. Later, there is going to be a discussion about adopting criteria for projects to be included or prioritized in the RTP, and I'll be commenting again then, but I think that this agenda item, specifically the proposed RTP amendment, kind of highlights one of the flaws with the way the projects have historically been managed with regard to the RTP. So to be clear, the Rio Dell Neighborhood Connectivity Project sounds great, and I have absolutely no objection to it. But I just think it's notable that it was conceived and planned outside of the RTP, and now that we find it required to be in there, we pass an amendment to add the project with no other changes to the RTP. I think that's just representative of the fact that historically jurisdictions have submitted lists of the projects that they want into the RTP every 4 years, and those projects have been included without connecting them in a meaningful way to the plan's goals, policies, and targets. And the jurisdictions have more or less seems like forgotten the RTP existed then until it's updated 4 years later. And so basically, we think that we can't afford to do business that way anymore. So I'm glad the Rio Dell project will be in the new RTP because it does sound like a great project. But what we really need to do is proactively and systematically assess this project and all the other projects submitted by the jurisdictions to see if they will collectively meet the RTP's safe and sustainable transportation targets, and then use this RTP as an actual guide to our transportation infrastructure activities over the next 4 years, rather than just letting it sit on a shelf and just checking the boxes when the rules require it. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others out there before we continue?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. Well, at this time, we had a motion on the floor, and we would need a roll call.
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Goldstein,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
PAC member Rex Jackman,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. And our next item is the Regional Transportation Plan Environmental Impact Report, Addendum. And do we have a staff report here?
Yes, yes, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, PAC members and any public attending. So a brief summary of what I put in the staff report. We did a full environmental impact report for the 2017 RTP. No, I'm sorry, the 2013-14 RTP 2 cycles ago. And then in 2017, looked at that EIR related to the update and found that there were no significant changes to either the policies or goals or projected impacts that would happen. And so then in 2017, the HCOG board adopted an addendum to the EIR. So today, in our third RTP update, or second since the EIR, we had some consultants help do the environmental impact assessment to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. And we had enough resources to do whatever was needed in case we needed a new EIR. We had grant money to pay for that. However, the consultants looked at all the new projects and policies in our draft VROOM 2022-2042 update and found that the projects and policies were very consistent with the last two RTPs, and that there were no additional significant impacts that they thought would happen, and no additional mitigation measures needed. So they recommended we do another addendum. We actually also got that recommendation from other consultants who had replied to the request for proposals. So that was kind of free consultation advice. And this addendum, the number 2, it still does talk in some detail about some of the environmental topics that have, from the state law, become a little bit more detailed in what we're supposed to discuss as far as greenhouse gas emissions and the new transportation impacts, and still found that, as the last addendum also found, no significant impacts and no new mitigations required. So that is what staff is recommending, that the board let us know if there are any final edits or concerns on this. We're not asking for certification at this meeting, but just to see if there are any changes we need to make before we do bring it back to you, and that you certify before making a decision on approving the RTP update. And that is my summary. Thank you.
And thank you. And going through the addendum, it was quite detail oriented, and it seems to hit all of the subject matter. And then I saw some of your comments regarding what the state has changed or done or asked for more information on. And it's a remarkable addendum, let alone I can't imagine the entire document. So thank you for that. Does anybody have a question for Una or a comment? Yeah.
And I'd like to just give credit where it's due. Our consultants at Plan West Partners prepared this, and I agree with you, did an absolutely excellent job.
Thank you for the oversight you had with them. Any comments? I want to make sure I see everybody. Last time I was missing people. And it appears none. I would just say direction would be to, I don't see anything that you noted and I would say doesn't need any changes that besides what you've done. And I would say it's to finalize the addendum to the final environmental impact report for the regional transportation plan. This is primarily a discussion and direction item. So anybody else have any comments other than that? No, don't see any nodding or shaking heads.
It's a go forth moment.
Yes. Okay, I think you've got your direction.
Excellent, thank you.
And following that up with the regional transportation plan project and equity criteria. Do we have a staff report for that item?
Yes, so these are two slightly separate but definitely related topics of the regional transportation plan update. Some of you were at the last meeting where the board consensus was to have staff research and continue discussion and have more input from the technical advisory committee for aligning the projects that get into the RTP with some kind of perhaps criteria or evaluation method so that it represents a little bit more strongly the new safe and sustainable transportation targets that we have drafted in this. So as a quick primer, our current RTP, the way that we identify, prioritize projects, it mostly happens in the complete streets element because mostly that is where HCOG has some discretionary funding that's not formula. And also roads and streets and sidewalks are more under your authority, the board's authority, than, for example, airports, which is under another board's authority. So in the current one, we use the 6 main objectives that the RTP has, and jurisdictions are then asked to self-identify for their projects which of the 6 objectives would this help achieve. And if they have 5 or more of those, it's tagged as a priority, and they're really only tagged as this is a priority or we're silent on it, and there's no ranking at all. There are just ones that have 5 out of 6 or 6 out of 6 of the objectives met. Now for this vroom update, instead of using the 6 main the overall main objectives, we are directing the criteria more towards the safe and sustainable transportation targets, performance measures, and a little bit of the confusion with the complete streets table in our draft was that not all jurisdictions actually filled out their projects. So there were many that were blank. And so it seemed like we had very many projects that upheld none of the objectives. Well, we still do have some projects like that. But we're trying to get a better process. So we went back to the TAC, and based on what the table at the time was showing us, I proposed for discussion, well, these kinds of projects seem to never have check marks. So are these candidates you would consider deleting out of the table? And there was a very good discussion. And for example, one of the things that they brought up was, well, whereas striping projects, none have been selected, those are really important safety measures that we can sometimes do. And they're very low cost. And for example, when we don't have proper striping for bikes, or even when your center line starts fading away, that's a very, very real safety concern. Then the consensus also came out that a new criterion for fix it first would be very helpful. And so the proposed revision right now has a fix it first column. And now, so I have a note on that it's incomplete because some of the jurisdictions then replied based on this new draft, but not all of them have redone it. So it's still a working document. And also we're looking to the board to weigh in if you have any concerns about adding that to the table as a criterion. And then I'll also just note, as the staff report discusses, we had at the TAC meeting comments from Colin Fisk, who is concerned that the if we start very much leaning towards fix it first, weighing heavily, that we won't be able to focus properly on the kinds of more transformative projects that might get us to our safe and sustainable transportation target goals. And he mentioned that, acknowledging we have so much backlog and so much fix it that, if in his words, he said, if we waited to do all the fix it first, we will not come close to our targets in the timelines that we have. And then I just will quickly update to you in the staff report I mentioned. Finishing on November 5th, up to that date, we had received 8 comments from 8 people, 6 of which were mostly or completely saying we like the safe, the SST targets, and we want to see, we basically want projects that are going to help achieve them. And since then, we have received 9 additional comment letters for a total of 17 so far. Of the new 9, 6 of them had the same kind of comment, that they liked the new targets and they liked what it will help achieve, and they want HCOG to make sure that projects in the RTP go towards fulfilling our targets. One comment letter was identifying that she saw lacking in our particularly complete streets element, enough discussion about the benefit of street trees and how those become a good safety strategy, and also would meet some of the goals that we talk about in our chapter 2 about the kind of communities and sense of place that we want streets and public places to be. And then one letter we got from the and I can say that was a letter on behalf of Keep Eureka Beautiful. And then we also got a letter from the Humboldt Trails Council, which was very supportive. They appreciate the new emphasis in the new room, especially the active transportation goals and policies, and particularly things that support trails. And then one letter from HARP, I think it's Humboldt area for responsible planning. They have a concern about one of the projects listed in the Complete Streets table, and they are requesting to eliminate the US 101 Trinidad area access improvement project from the Complete Streets table. So that is where we stood. And then to have a way forward for criteria with the projects. I'll let Executive Director Beth Burks discuss the policy draft language that she has for adding to the RTP. So after the adoption of the RTP, we can do action items for addressing this discussion.
Yeah, so thank you, Una. I think that was a great overview. And I think what I would like to propose is essentially, and I'll share my screen in a second here and show you the actual language, because in listening to what the comments are saying, I think what I'm proposing won't quite get us there, because they're looking at, not even including projects in the RTP. But what I would like to propose is that we have an action item to develop a tool or process to evaluate projects that qualify for discretionary non-formula funding that's available through HCOG, and that the tool or process would be intended to aid in prioritizing projects that provide the most benefit in achieving the priorities set forth in the RTP and the safe and sustainable transportation targets. So I'm going to share my screen on this, just so if we want to, I'm not a huge fan of wordsmithing by group process, but just so you guys can see the language, because we don't have it in a draft format, in the document. But I think that the reason I'm proposing this is, one is it won't slow down our RTP and still lets us adopt it timely. But also, the RTP is used for a lot of purposes, and I think we do want to be careful on really hamstringing our jurisdictions. If they need to apply for funding and their first question is, is this available, or is this project in the RTP? And maybe it is just rehabilitation project or something, that they would be able to say yes. And I think that, with the way we would structure the table, we would be sure, by adding that fixes first column, that, at least one of our objectives on there is met by any project that's included in the RTP. But I think this approach would give us some time to really work closely with the TAC and the board and come up with a plan that would take into consideration all of the priorities. So we already have, a lot of priorities in our RTP that have been there all along for many cycles, that say we'll prioritize funding for active transportation. We'll prioritize, and I've got them all down here. We have new policies related to prioritizing equity and coming up with, potentially a tool that helps rank that. And so we could really be thoughtful about how we want to evaluate those projects and work together to do that before the next STIP cycle, before we actually have more discretionary funding available to us. The other things we have for priorities that again, some version of these have been in our RTP for a long time, is transportation for compact mixed-use development, prioritizing community needs. And we have that fix it first. In this version, it is specific to safety, and also bike plan policies that have priorities about kind of looking at the level of service and quality of service related to bikes. So the list kind of goes on, but just to say that we have a lot of priorities and they land in a lot of different places in our plan. And so I think really thinking about comprehensively what all have we kind of committed to, and how do we want to make sure that projects we bring forward where we do have some influence on that funding source, how do we want to rank them, or at least decide which ones are kind of worthy for receiving HCOG funding. So I'd love to get the PAC's take on this. Happy to do any kind of rearranging, or if it's just a terrible idea, you can tell me that too. So.
Do we have any comments or questions for our executive director? I can't see any people, so I will trust you to.
Wait, I can stop sharing my screen just so that we get a little better view of everybody. I'll pull that back up if we need it.
Yeah, I like the words there in case people.
Oh, okay, I can go back.
But does anyone have a comment, a question, another words they'd like to add to the policy?
I have two questions.
Yes, Mayor Jones.
Okay, question number one. In the list in the staff report, are those the priorities by the first one being the first priority and then the second one and so on? Are they listed in prioritized order?
So is that the mode shift lowers VM? The first answer is no. We've never ranked one criteria over another.
Yeah, I'm looking at the RTP performances, measures, and targets. And you have, you have how long it's going to take to the data schedule and that kind of thing. But I just wondered if those are prioritized.
They are not.
Okay. And then the second question I have is about the map that was included, I believe, in the staff report. And my question is at the bottom in the legend, it says, okay, orange is disadvantaged communities, conditions A only. And then green, disadvantaged communities, conditions B only. And then yellow is disadvantaged communities, conditions A and B. So I noticed that Blue Lake is in the orange. And then I noticed it looks like most of the Hoopa Valley tribe and the Hoopa reservation is mostly in the yellow. And anyway, my question is that what does that mean? What are the conditions that we're talking about here that put certain areas in green, certain in yellow? Is this by what people make in the town? Is it the income of the individuals?
Yes, that is one of the, that is a criterion that in both condition A and B, a census block would overall have to have. And the whole process of the criteria is in the staff report. And I didn't go over this yet for the board. So the first way we would find census blocks under condition A would be all of those that have two things, racial or ethnic minority, where 20% or more of the population is either Hispanic or not white, and households with low incomes, that being the 80% or less than statewide median household income. And we base this on census data. So that is the condition A. And then condition condition B is one, you would have to have a census designation of the same household low incomes, plus then we have 9 variables. And if you had any 3 of these 9, then that would also mean that we would identify that as a disadvantaged community. So those 9 do not include racial or ethnic minority, but other things that basically talk about poverty and populations that generally have less transportation access or are more vulnerable. For example, elderly populations and youth populations, and then also households without a vehicle, and also households that don't have transportation infrastructure within a half-mile radius. So those are the kinds of other variables that you would have to have 3 of 9 to then be that other color, conditions B.
Okay, well, that clears a lot up. Oh, go ahead, Una, sorry.
Oh, just that we base this on 2 different models, one from a very large, robust urban area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and then also, I believe it was Mendocino or Lake, I'm sorry, I forget which one, and they did something very similar to this. So we worked from their models.
And when you say it's from the census, you're talking about the 2010 census. We don't have facts yet from the 2020.
Right. So it'd be the census and or the American Community Survey, whichever gives us all of it consistently most recent. And we would, and if this were what the board wanted to go with as HCOG in the future using as equity criteria, of course, we would update the stuff as soon as we could.
Okay. Okay, I think that's why that makes sense for Blue Lake then, because I think we have a lot of elderly people here. I think that's why we would, that would be one of the variables. Anyway, and that was in your staff report. I guess I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. It was the third page.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments, concepts?
We do have public comment from Colin Fisk.
Okay, thank you.
Colin Fisk, you can talk.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you heard some of my comments on this topic earlier, so I'll try not to repeat myself. But I just really want to make the point that the regional transportation plan should actually be the region's plan for transportation, and not just a document that we complete to fulfill a state or a federal mandate. And I think that means that we need a comprehensive assessment to ensure that the projects in the plan actually align with the policies and also add up to meeting its targets. Based on the previous comments of the board at other meetings, I think most of you, understand and agree with that point. But as we've seen, it isn't really the way that our local public works agencies are used to doing things, so it will require a shift in approach. In fact, it took a bit of effort to get staff of those agencies, as Una mentioned earlier, to even self-attest that their projects are consistent with some of the target areas. And now when I review some of those new self-attestations, frankly, some of them don't make that much sense to me. And certainly they don't show whether the projects add up to meeting the safe and sustainable targets or not. I also want to address the issue of fix it first, which was emphasized by the TAC. And to clarify that CRTP supports a fix it first approach, but that means fixing existing roads before adding new vehicular capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean fixing all existing roads before spending any local money on active transportation or transit, because basically we can't afford to rely only on competitive grant funding, which is uncertain and unreliable, to support those improvements, or we won't get them done on time. And in any case, Fix It First isn't necessarily even in conflict with these other priorities, because restriping and other kinds of low-cost improvements can be included in routine road maintenance and repair. Finally, I wanted to note that we strongly support staff's efforts to develop these quantitative equity criteria for assessing proposed projects. And based on the comments that we heard at the TAC meeting, though, we do have some concern that there may be pressure to water down the equity criteria a bit by either expanding the boundaries of areas considered disadvantaged, or by arguing that projects outside of those areas serve disadvantaged groups and therefore should count towards filling the equity objectives. While there are some situations that might be appropriate, like where there's only a single access point to a disadvantaged community, we would urge you to tread carefully there and to make those kinds of cases the exception rather than the rule, because otherwise it will be pretty simple for any agency to claim that any project serves a disadvantaged community just because some members of that community use it along with everyone else. And that would make the equity criteria pretty meaningless. So again, we support developing these strong and quantitative equity criteria, and would like to see them strongly applied. Thank you.
And thank you. Go
Chair
ahead.
Johnson, I also have a letter that we received that I can read into the record.
Yes, please.
Chair Johnson and HCOG board members, this letter is regarding recent discussions on project and equity criteria in the Regional Transportation Plan. As a citizen advocate, I have sunk many hours into deciphering current policy as well as the new RTP draft. I served on the ad hoc committee for the greenhouse gas targets and contributed to the update in other ways as well. While the November 4th, 2021 TAC meeting record is not yet posted, I understand there was a strong backlash from the committee when staff proposed using project criteria as in mode shift, lowers VMT, access, and Vision Zero to align with the RTP's main objectives. This step would be evolution, not revolution, which rarely leads to controversy. As for the status quo, I've been meaning to ask, why do we currently allow projects in the RTP that are inconsistent with our stated goals and priorities? As I see it, they undermine the credibility of that document. And it was even more surprising that a technical committee would even step outside its charter and attempt to influence process and policy. I'm shaking my head that a group of people who believe that our transportation system is primarily for cars could be in a position to shape our collective future. The TAC members seem pretty confident they know the right direction for all of us. I'm hoping the HCOG board takes this opportunity to clarify organizational boundaries and committee roles. If there were ever a time for hard internal conversations, it is now. The new RTP will have ripple effects in our community for decades. Nearly every resident of Humboldt County will feel its impact. As we face converging crises for climate change, traffic safety, and equity, how will we respond? Will our plan double down on a broken status quo, or will it lead us toward a more sustainable, safe, and just future? One thing is clear, ongoing community engagement will be essential. When deciding whether to get involved and lend my voice in the RTP process, I was wary. I knew that community stakeholders are often marginalized. Citizens are included only to discover later that our viewpoints and values were never translated into action. Friends and colleagues predicted I would be wasting my time. Ultimately, I decided this is a crucial moment, an inflection point, and I could not stand on the sidelines. Right now, it looks like a committee that operates mostly out of public view and whose members are not accountable can sabotage these efforts and force us back to the status quo. Personally, I'm angry with myself for believing change was possible. There are probably others who feel the same. Why would anyone engage with local or regional governments when vested interests always win? We deserve a functional transport network. We deserve process and organization that brings positive results. We demand real community engagement, not the checkbox kind. Words can be meaningful or they can be empty. It's up to us. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Submitted by Elaine Astru.
Thank you for that.
And I think that is all of the public comments.
Okay, any board comments? Don't see any. I know that sometimes things can be very frustrating. I have been involved in probably $2 million worth of sidewalk projects in the last 8 years for safe routes to school and HSIP, and you still see cars queuing up. We can build the infrastructure, we can put it in place, we can add RRFBs and in-roadway lighting, but we need to get people to use them. And I'm not sure how we do that. Does that mean we shouldn't continue building the multimodal infrastructure? No, it does not mean that. But we need to figure out a way to get the public in to use it. And I'm not sure how you do that. I'm trying to find my place in this where we're at now. So we're at the point now where there is a, can you put the words back up there? So that is the language that says shall develop a tool or process to evaluate the projects that qualify for discretionary non-formula funding available through HCOG. Shall develop. And we have a sample motion here. I move that the PAC recommend the HCOG board direct staff to make changes to the final room 2242 Complete Streets project, which would, as I understand it, shall develop, would develop a tool or process to evaluate projects. Is that correct?
That is ultimately the goal. Right now, what staff is imagining is more of a two-step process. And also to clarify that when I made the staff report with this recommended motion, we had not developed this policy language yet. So the first thing about changing the Complete Streets project table, the big question there is it your recommendation that we add the fix it first column and then have the jurisdictions reassess their projects with also that criterion? And then shall we add this policy to the RTP update, and then once it's adopted, this would be one of HCOG staff's action items to work on a process for prioritizing projects. And then just to repeat what Executive Director Burks started with, this is addressing a part of the desires of the community and as well as board members and some committee members, but the part it does not address is deciding, are we going to have thresholds for actually allowing projects to even be listed in the RTP or not? Yeah, I leave it to Beth to clarify anything I've missed.
I think you got it, Una.
And I would ask, how would the tool or process be brought forward? How would that be established?
Yeah, I think my thought, is sort of similar to the way the safe and sustainable targets were. So, we would work through the TAC and the board, perhaps even an ad hoc committee that could really focus on it. I would not want that to be just a totally staff-led activity. I really want to make sure we're thinking comprehensively about all consequences. Again, this is tied in also with the equity, because when it says in this last line, achieving the priorities set forth in the regional transportation plan and the safe and sustainable transportation targets, those other priorities include our equity initiatives. So it all goes together. It's a big job. Really thinking thoroughly about, what are these projects accomplishing? We may also have some data gaps that we're going to realize, how much mode shift does a project result in? Is it just bike lane miles, or does location play into that? Does, Chair Johnson, like you were explaining, you've put in a lot of sidewalks and it's not necessarily, we're not seeing the dip in car travel because of that necessarily. So, do we have the ability to measure this? Do we know what the impact of the projects would be towards our safe and sustainable targets? How would we measure that? A lot to cover there. I don't expect this to be a small task. I think it's a big task, and we're going to need a lot of experts involved, and we're going to need a lot of community input. And I picture that through sort of a transparent ad hoc TAC, SS TAC, especially for the equity and transit implications. So I think it's a major group effort, and would be a big focus, and the hope really being that we would we would have it in time for the next STIP cycle, which is again kind of that next big pot of discretionary money we get. A lot of money flows through HCOG. We don't always have a whole lot of discretion over how that flow goes and what it's used for. The STIP is a place we have some of that ability to make those decisions. I would hope that through this process we could work with the TAC, and I'm hopeful that we're not as far apart as it sounds like it is by the report you've heard tonight. I think that our public works directors are keenly aware of needs, but framing it in this way for them may help them put different projects forward than they may have considered. Certainly there's no shortage of projects that they have desire to complete that they could decide which come forward to HCOG and which go forward for other funding sources. So that's basically how I envision it.
Yeah, and I know that sometimes in the imagining the fix it first column is an opportunity for expanding the pavement width so that you can get bike and ped infrastructure on both sides of the road, and also enhancing, as has been brought forward, enhancing striping, and there's other things in there that can take place at the same time when a fix it first project may be going on if that column moves into them. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. Some people see an elephant, some people see a snake, some people see a big leather plant. So, but it's still, on its heart, it's an elephant. So, any other comments or questions after I went down that rabbit trail?
I just asked you to clarify. So what we're looking at is the motion that was on the staff report, plus adding the fix it column, plus adding this language. That's what the motion would look like? Or if somebody wanted to make the motion, they can leave out the fix it column or leave out this part.
I think the fix it column was what was put in the staff report as the
okay. It didn't say it specifically, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, we can start from that point. Does anyone make a motion?
Well, I will go ahead and do it since I asked about that. I move that the PAC recommend the HCOG board direct staff to make changes to the final Vroom 2022-2042 Complete Streets project table and receive direction regarding the equity criteria, and HCOG shall develop a tool or process to evaluate projects that qualify for discretionary non-formula funding available through HCOG, such as the State Transportation Improvement Program. The tool or process is intended to aid prioritizing projects that provide the most benefit and achieving the priorities set forth in both the Regional Transportation Plan and the Safe and Sustainable Transportation Targets.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Jones? Mayor Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Seaman?
Yes.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Yes.
Councilmember West?
Yes.
PAC member Rex Jackman?
Yes.
Chair Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. That brings us through there, and we, by motion, will reconvene as the HCOG board and pass the approved items from the PAC. Couldn't see that, it was in the dark over here.
Yeah, this paper is a little dark to read, although it's a pretty color. I so move that we can reconvene the HCOG board and approve PAC recommendations.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. Can we get another roll call?
Mayor Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Seaman?
Yes.
Councilmember Goldstein,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion passes.
and thank you. And at this time, we'll move to the staff and PAC member reports. First would be with Executive Director Burke's report.
Thank you. So I think we shouldn't have this meeting without mentioning that the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, has been signed. So we're all anxiously awaiting to know what that means. And I don't have much to report about what it means for us. I think there's been, some analysis on what it means for California, which is about $45.5 billion from the package, with around $30 billion going towards roads, highways, bridges, another $9.45 billion towards public transportation. There's also lots of competitive federal programs and some new that will either be new or augmented, such as Safe Streets for All, that would directly support local governments for Vision Zero projects, which is great news. Lots of money in there for electric vehicle charging networks, which is right in line with our targets. So a lot of good stuff in there. We just don't know quite what it means for regions and individual municipalities yet. So best I can tell is it's going to take several months before we really figure out how the state is going to get that money out to us. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we are going to be closely tracking this. We'll be participating with, conversations with Caltrans as they, want to share how they may be rolling out projects, and also, rural counties task force at the, of all the RTPAs will be working on this and be sure we're advocating for a good position for the rural region and for our region. So I think it is good news. We just don't know exactly what the good news mean yet for us here, but I think we see a lot of projects in there that are very much in line with what we put in the regional transportation plan. So it is exciting, and I think since I started here, it's like it's gonna happen, and so finally something is real, and we just have to be a little more patient to see how it really rolls out. And then the other thing I just want to mention, a quick scheduling note. So our next board meeting was going to be in December. It's fairly close to the Christmas holiday, so we are looking at canceling that meeting to make sure we can accommodate people's schedule, and we would reconvene in January, kicking off with really the adoption of the regional transportation plan at that meeting. So that is what I am suggesting, and that really concludes my ED report.
Okay, thank you. And it will be interesting to see what funding filters through here. And I think that the Rural Counties Task Force and the North State Super Region will be integral in making sure that we get our share of the funding here. So thank you. With that, we come to Caltrans reports. Mr. Jackman, I believe.
I don't really have anything specific to report at the meeting. I'm kind of a substitute teacher today, but I will say that it has been a long time. Many years ago, I sat for many years as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee, and it's nice to see so many new faces, and I can recall quite a few of those unmet transit need meetings being much more dramatic affairs. So I'll take that as a plus that it went so smoothly. If there are any questions, I'll do my best to find answers for them. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Jackman?
I have a question, sir, about the last chance grade. I'm concerned about the winter weather, and do you have any update on the status of that thoroughfare?
I didn't get a latest update, but the last time I heard, there hadn't been any significant slides or earth movement up there. The last report that I heard personally. So I'm not aware of anything associated with the weather occurring. I do know that the funding was recently secured for to complete the environmental studies, which is a huge amount of funding. And if I could certainly pass on, and we could maybe have somebody come in to provide a little more detailed update at a meeting in the future, if that would be requested. I see heads nodding.
Yes, typically what we have is a specific report on the Arcata Eureka 101 corridor and a report on the last chance grade. And I understand that the grade changes, from day to day, and depending on the weather and what, but we usually have that broken out in our agenda.
Yeah, and in fact, I thought I did see somewhere in looking at the information for this meeting, I thought a project manager, I think, was going to be here, but looks like they didn't make it.
No, I can weigh in on that. So usually Jeff Pimentel joins us. He's been joining us monthly, and he did have a conflict this month, and so I let him off the hook because I've been attending their weekly meetings, and or I attended last one. There's not a ton of progress. They did report out at the TAC. I mean, they're making the progress as intended on Highway 101, the Eureka Arcata corridor, with still projecting the rebid package to go out in I think February is the earliest we'll see it out. So I think they are on track for that, but there's really not a lot of excitement unless you want to hear a lot of details, engineering details about settlement criteria and things like that. But they are on track and working daily towards that. And so I think we will anticipate seeing that package go out February or March, and then that's really when Jeff will probably start resuming his monthly visits with us, so that he can tell us, how the responses are coming in and what the budgets are looking like and the timeframes. So until then, I think it's just no news is good news in terms of them staying on the path that they've already indicated to the board.
And on last chance grade, is there a particular person who provides those regular updates that I can let them know that you were asking about it? Because I know there are a number of different folks that are involved in the cooperative efforts up there, but I'm not sure exactly. I can ask somebody to come in and provide an update.
And I think it was usually just the PAC member who was coming that was just kind of giving us an update, not necessarily the project manager.
Okay. Well, I'll pass it on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. You may not think so, but yes, you did provide information for us. So thank you. And we would normally have PAC member reports now, but I don't know if anybody's here from HTA. I don't believe so. All right. Well, we've had discussion. We've got direction, and we're moving forward. So with that, go ahead.
Maybe had her hand up.
Oh, I didn't see her.
I just wanted to say one thing. Yesterday, we had our kickoff for the countywide traffic safety task force. And Beth and Mayor Jones were there, as well as Karen Deemer from City of Arcata and folks from CHP and Virginia Bass, all to sort of Mayor Garnes, yes. There were probably about 30 people there yesterday, 30 or 35, which is a very good showing of community leaders who really support the idea of not only committing to our jurisdictions, making a commitment to do what we can to improve the safety of our streets, but also a plea to drivers to also be part of the solution and, drive slow and keep your eyes on the road, which is the theme that we came up with. So Rio Dell, the Board of Supervisors and City of Eureka have all adopted the proclamation that the task force came up with. Arcata and Blue Lake have it on their agendas. And I have not heard from the other cities. So if anybody here is interested and would like to see the proclamation, I would love to send it to you, Councilmember Johnson. And I believe in Trinidad as well. Steve Ladwig was on our, asked to be on the committee. So I think he'll support it as well. So I'll send those to you guys. I have a giant proclamation that when you do it, I will come to your city and you can sign it. Unless you're meeting virtually, then I'll come to you personally and you can sign it and I'll show it on the screen. So thank you all.
Well, thank you. I did see that, and I did see Mayor Jones there. And so, and in the background, I saw some people I knew and some I didn't. But I know you've been working hard on that for a few months now to get that going. So
we started on March 10th last year. So
yeah,
it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you for your publicity of that important thing. And yes, it's a matter of personal responsibility for people. You know, safety starts with the person behind the wheel. So
it takes all of us. It takes the planning and it takes the enforcement and it takes us personally. So.
Yeah. So thank you. Well, with that, I believe we're adjourned, and have a happy Thanksgiving and we will see you all in January. Thank you.